And welcome, everyone. You're listening to iTalk 106.7 FM, the voice of the mountain. I'm your host, Janine Ford, and super happy to have Nick Myers with the Corporation Commission on today. How are you, Nick?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on the show. It's great to talk to you again.
I know it's been a long time. It was last time you were running for the Corporation Commission, I believe, you and Thompson.
You could have been, yeah.
Yeah, and so I catch us up. There's been so much going on for us up here in the White Mountains in Navajo and Apache County. Of course, we first got some of the good news about with TEP and SRP with the natural gas over there in Apache County, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're talking about the conversions of the coal plants from Coronado and Springerville, I believe. And
yes.
Yeah, we approved that just a few months ago. They were, they're scheduled originally to shut down in the mid 2030s. And of course, that would just decimate those communities over there because most of the community works at those plants.
Right.
So we've been working on ways to keep those online. And unfortunately, just recently, coal prices have doubled or close to tripled. So that made it even harder to keep them online. But one thing we've done since the very beginning is try to bring more natural gas into the state. And a few months ago, you heard the news about bringing that big old pipeline from Texas into Arizona, and what that's doing is enabling us to allow those plants to convert to natural gas, and that'll keep them open for the foreseeable future, certainly a couple of generations and maybe more.
And see, that's the beautiful thing. And then we just get word too about APS and it going natural gas with Cholla, right?
Yeah, so Cholla was an interesting one because it shut down, and then a few weeks later, President Trump announced his big, beautiful coal bill or whatever that was, and specifically named Cholla. And
right.
That was, of course, that kind of made us wet our pants, for obvious reasons. But
exactly. You're so like, did he just say Cholla? Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's exactly right. So it's been an interesting time, but we were trying to find ways to keep that plant open anyway because we need all the electrons and molecules we can get on our grid right now. But it just wasn't happening because the EPA wasn't set up to do that. The EPA rules were still difficult. So now that it's about a year later, we've got the new pipeline coming in. We rekindled those discussions with the utilities, and sure enough, we were able to make it happen as far as reopening Cholla, but as a natural gas plant, not as a coal plant, which is just as good, if not better. It still keeps that workforce, gets that workforce going again, and it brings more electrons to the grid that, as Cholla was shutting down, they were replacing those that generation with other sources of generation. Well, now this is just an additive thing, so that really helps our electric future.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing is, I've been saying all along, I'm like, we need a bridge. We just need a bridge to get us to nuclear power, eventually, because that's the best choice and the cleanest choice, right?
Oh, 100%. I've been working for years. As a matter of fact, I was the vice chairman of the national organization for the nuclear subcommittee. So I did that for a number of years before we got Rene Lopez elected last cycle. He's an actual nuclear engineer, so I kind of turned the reins over to him. But ultimately, nuclear has been one of my passions since I got elected. We've been working very hard to bring that to fruition and try to get the tech companies to pay for the first few nuclear plants because, honestly, we don't want our ratepayers paying for research and development costs. So we've been very successful in that. The tech companies started investing, a year or so ago in small modular reactors. You got Amazon working with X Energy, Google working with Kairos. You even have Microsoft and Bill Gates investing in Constellation to open up the 3 Mile Island generating station. So there's a lot of nuclear going on. There's a ton of nuclear development in the U.S. that's very positive for Arizona as a whole because those developments basically reduce the cost for the next few units, and now we can start looking at those for Arizona in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not intermittent. It's now a lot of people in the White Mountains in Navajo and Apache have been really, really afraid of all the renewable stuff with, because our lands and the big Coconino aquifer that, rolls all under these lands, with all the springs all over the place. We've been afraid of these big, gigantic wind turbines and solar fields. And so explain to me, with bringing up APS online, is that going to kind of fill our lines as it is, like the renewables we have in place and the gas coming on? Will that fill our lines enough to back off these renewables by chance?
I don't have specific numbers for you, but I do know that is, those lines, as I mentioned, generation has been backfilling for Cholla, since it was scheduled to start shutting down. So a lot of that generation has been, replaced already, and now you're adding Cholla to it. We've got a ton of power that goes through that Cholla substation or generating station. Just because it comes in from the east and some from the north, and there's just a whole lot of power at that location. So it doesn't surprise me that it actually is getting fairly full as far as capacity goes. Now, that also means that there's going to have to be some infrastructure upgrades and whatnot eventually. Is it enough to stop new development of those resources? I don't know the answer to that, and honestly, that's a tough one because a lot of that has to do with local planning and zoning or state trust land. So organizations like us don't really have a say as to whether it comes online or not. We only have a say as to whether it connects to the grid or not, and even that is very limited in the sense that we can. There's only certain 9 or 10 check boxes that if they check them, we don't have a choice really but to approve it legally. So there's a lot of discussion on that, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me a bit if it slows down that progress, and by that time maybe there's new technologies in, like nuclear.
Right,
so it certainly is going to have an impact on it in some fashion. I just can't tell you, every single scenario.
Every single thing, yeah. And quite frankly, we've known that, Hobbs is a real big proponent of just, signing these 100-year leases on our state trust lands. And I'm just saying, me personally, if we can get her out of there, those state trust lands and our ranchers might not be going down the drain as fast. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so
100%. And honestly, I believe that she's using that to subvert the will of the people because she knows that it's tough for counties to deny something like that, when it's on state trust land. So if you stop doing that and allow the counties and the local governments to do their planning and zoning like they're supposed to, now all of a sudden you have some control over it again. So I totally agree with you. Getting Hobbs out of there's many benefits to doing that.
Yes, exactly. She's, 100-year leases with these gigantic solar fields and stuff are just scary. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, just yesterday you did a tour of the biomass plant. How was that for you? What'd you think of that?
That was actually very cool. There's only one in the state, and I've never toured that particular plant before. And, it was what was, I guess, the biggest eye-opener for me during that tour was that it's not really about the electricity. Yes, the electricity sales are what actually, provide the capital for that plant to run. But the mission largely is focused on forest restoration.
Right.
And that is a huge deal. It's only a 27 or 28 megawatt generating station, which is a drop in the bucket compared to the 8,700 megawatts that APS's territory is. So it's a small fraction of it, but it allows the restoration of thousands and thousands of acres of our forest land. So, and it only would take another one of those plants, maybe over on the other side of Flagstaff or something, to cover the vast majority of the forests in Arizona. And they've had a massive impact on major wildfires. So I think the last major one was the Willow Fire, and it was like 15 years ago.
Right.
And it's because they're doing this forest thinning and clearing in various pockets that are actually protecting the properties and the forests around it. So it's a very good tool for wildfire. And as you probably know, I've been hosting wildfire workshops for all of our utilities and whatnot that brings in Forest Service and emergency response crews and the public and everybody. I do that once a year because it's an important topic. Our utilities end up getting blamed for a lot of the forest stuff that goes on as far as wildfires. That was proven in California, Hawaii, Texas, and it's causing insurance rates to go up.
Right.
Anything we can do to stop wildfires will help that problem.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That is so true. And for the forest help, that's what I love about the biomass. But on that note, that's the other issue, that there's tons of fire people, like fire prevention people, that have talked about the huge concern because we have such fire danger here in the White Mountains, right? That one wind turbine falling over with its almost 200 gallons of crude oil inside of it. If one gets hit by lightning or one topples over into our situation, how dry and how we've always been with wildfires and our high winds, okay?
Yep.
One does that, or solar field or anything. What they've described it to me, fire experts, is it's like putting a bomb in the middle of our fire danger, and that insurance companies then will more insurance companies will pull out of the White Mountains. And so that's the big thing, is I think about with the renewables specifically. When people think about how self-contained and amazing the nuclear is, you've got a small footprint, where the renewables have this giant footprint, and it can take hazmat, which we don't have hazmat teams. We don't have, you know what I mean? So that's the bigger, I just think, who's responsible if it kicks off a gigantic wildfire and just burns through Cholla, Arizona. You know what I mean?
Oh, you're 100% correct. And up in your neck of the woods, insurance rates for the residents there and their cabins out in the woods, things of that nature, have gone up from like $2,000 a year to $10,000 a year recently. And it's all because of wildfires and whatnot. So anything we can do to mitigate that liability is a huge thing in Arizona. And so far, Arizona's doing a pretty good job at going down the right path. And this biomass plant is one of those ways that we deal with that.
Right. I love the biomass for the forest health and wildfire prevention. I hope we can expand it. And it's also good for jobs up here, because with the biomass and moving that material, tons of material, and with our drought situation, you look at all the tons of juniper just for miles that are turned red and brown because of the, and when you take those out, the pasture space is unreal, because tons of these dead junipers, and the junipers suck up all the water. So, and they're not native, which is they're very invasive, is what I'm trying to say. But so a lot of that stuff, the wildfire prevention, the little bit of power production you mentioned, but then the local jobs. I'm just waiting, if they expand biomass, there should be some companies that are just jump up and say, okay, we're removing the dead junipers. That's our business. There's dead juniper removal or something, or but it would help so much in our fire prevention. And then also keeping as the firefighting force calls the bombs, the big, because we are such a tinder dry area, and fire races across this land, it's going to be really, really scary with the if it's wind turbines or solar fields.
Right.
So that's something. Go ahead.
You bring up a very good point about the employment and whatnot. One of the things I took away from yesterday was just how important having a place to put the scraps, if you will, from the forestry and from other companies. Yeah. Right? There's pellet manufacturing companies that can only use certain parts of the tree, for example. The rest of it is trash to them. Where do they put it? Well, if that biomass plant is full or shuts down, that means they shut down their process as well. There's all kinds of timber companies and things like that if they can't dispose of their product, it brings their economy to a halt as well. So it's not just the plant that has the employment benefits. It's what the plant does for other businesses that also has a major impact on the economy up there.
Yeah, it's huge. It's just absolutely huge. So I hope we can move in that direction with the biomass. That would be incredible. And like you say, over by Flagstaff, that would be a really good location too, to
Right.
get all this dry material moved off and help save our
Right.
forests. That would be wonderful. So I also wanted to ask you about rate increases, and you've got this big one that months and months and months and months.
Yeah.
So what's
Yeah.
going on and what has gone on with our rate increases?
Yeah, sure. I wish we had, hours to talk about it, but I'll just say that, the Constitution of Arizona does not allow the commission to just simply say no to a rate increase. I want to make that perfectly clear that, our constitutional authority is that we must set just and reasonable rates. That's our what our charter says.
Right.
So with that said, just and reasonable means just and reasonable for the company as well as the ratepayers. So we have to find that happy middle. And the way we do it is with it's like a 12 to 18 month process in the case of an APS size rate case. Those are massive. I will tell you, I got to be careful about what I say because of ex parte and prejudging and things like that. But I will tell you that a utility is allowed to come in and ask for whatever they want. That doesn't mean they're going to get it, and I've never seen them get everything they want. So they come in, they're going to ask for the moon, and we're going to go in and pare that down to something that is reasonable for both sides. And that's exactly where we are currently. They're asking for a, whatever it is, 13, 14% rate increase. But the reality is we're in the middle of that process now where we're wrapping up the hearing phase of this process. So the hearing phase is just like a normal court case, right? You can do discovery, you can call witnesses, you can cross-examine the witnesses, all of that before a judge, the administrative law judge, who is our employee. And then that judge ultimately creates a recommended opinion and order and then gives it to us where we can then go in and make amendments. So that part of the process won't happen until probably closer to the end of the year, maybe even the beginning of next year, where we get to see that. But that's where we are in the process, and that's kind of a real quick how the process works.
Yeah, so that'll be after the first of the year, you're saying, right? And also, now you're running for reelection on the Corporation Commission, right?
Correct.
Okay, and how can people find out more about your run, Nick Myers, and your website and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. We actually have a couple of websites. I say we because Kevin Thompson and I are running as a team. We've made a great team on the commission for the last 4 years, and we want to continue that. So we are still running as a team. The joint website is urazcc.team.gov. So urazccteam.com. I'm sorry. So to put that in verbiage, it's urazccteam.com. That will take you to links to both of our websites, but mine is just nickmyers.us. So it's nickmyers.us. And again, the joint website is urazccteam.com.
Okay. And the thing about the Corporation Commission is that you guys are supposed to watch and help with those rate increases for, the people of Arizona because, our basically our power rates have gone through the roof. And then sometimes some of the writings online, you'll go to the Corporation Commission website, and sometimes, and I'm just saying, so I wanted you to refute this or talk about it, but sometimes some of the writings sound like some of the corporation commissioners are lobbyists for the power companies. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I can tell you that our job is to provide that check and balance, to a monopoly company. That's the whole reason we exist. To say that we are beholden to the utility companies is quite laughable because our ethics rules, first off, they basically force us to run a clean elections campaign. So we can't even take campaign dollars from them in any meaningful way, right? The funding comes from public funding, which is generated from speeding tickets and DUIs. We're not saying go out and speed and drive, but if you do, thank you for contributing to our campaign. And, so the process is very, very stringent. It puts all of us on a level playing field. It takes all corporations out of the picture, meaning we can't take money from any type of corporation or PAC or anything like that. It's just not allowed. So, and we don't, yes, we have a relationship with the utilities. We have to because we're regulating them. That's just logical, right? But we've cut out over $1 billion out of their rate cases since we were elected the last time. Do you think they're going to be happy about that? Or you think they are happy about that? Probably not.
Yeah.
$1 billion is a lot of zeros at the end there.
Yeah.
So we've been doing a lot of things that do not make them happy. We cut out board of director fees, right? That's something that's been allowed to be recovered from the ratepayers for 100 years since we became a state, and we cut it out because it doesn't benefit the ratepayer. So we're definitely doing things that are 100% not in the favor of the utilities, and to say that we're lobbying for the utilities is almost laughable in that sense.
Well, that's just what some people have, what I've had some messages and different things, and just they sound like,
welcome to politics.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but yeah, and that, that's good to know. And I know it's, everything has gone up in cost, everything, and the cost of everything, but I'm sure the utilities are doing just fine, go ahead.
Couple of stats for you if you've got some time.
Yes.
So during the Obama and Biden administration, we saw inflation rise about 30% was the general number. We're starting to see that hit ratepayers now because, like I said, it takes a number of years before the costs that they spend actually get put into rates. Just the rate-making process takes over a year, as I just described. We're keeping those rates down to less than 10%, those increases as a general rule. So we're doing much better than the inflationary costs. The EIA just came out with another round of studies. This is the second one since we've been in office. And this last year, from I think it was April to April, they had they did a study of the overall electric prices across the U.S. have gone up something like 7.6%. And in Arizona, believe it or not, the overall cost actually went down by 1.2%.
Oh, okay.
That's an incredible number considering the number of increases we've had to give, but it has to do with bringing in growth and everything, economic growth and all this other stuff. Right. So it's not a simplistic number. But the last study, which was for the year before that, overall growth was 3.7%. Arizona was only at 1.5%. So even the year before, it was a quarter of what the rest of the nation did. So good Republican values in Arizona are what are keeping our rates some of the lowest in the lower half of the rates across the nation. We are well below the national average, and we have been, and we continue to lower that.
Well, and I do know, across the country, I have some friends that they pay far more. Yes. And so we have to be thankful for that. That's for sure. Yes.
Right.
And
now, I don't want to minimize the impact to ratepayers. I know that nobody likes a rate increase ever, and neither do we. We're subject to the same things, but we do our best to keep those as low as possible.
Yeah. And they probably, Big Energy asks for 13 or 14% increase, knowing that they really have to have like 8 or something, that they're going to get less, but they probably ask for more. It's the whole normal, push and pull kind of a game, but that's exactly a good thing. And I myself personally will be willing to pay a little bit more if we can keep the renewables out of it, or not totally out of it, but mostly out of it. Go ahead.
I tell you, the best thing you can do to help keep renewables under control is to get a new governor in there. We've ran bills the last couple of cycles that would allow the Corporation Commission regulatory authority over renewables, because currently ARS 40, which is something the legislature does, the statute the legislature makes, it currently says that we have control over thermal generation. We've been trying to put in a comma and non-thermal for the last 2 sessions, and it made it through the House and it made it through the Senate, but it was vetoed by Hobbs. So that's one of those things that we can do to try to gain some control over that, but we're going to have a new governor to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Veto queen. Yep. Yeah, exactly. All righty. Well, thank you so much. It's been awesome talking to you. Nick Myers with the Corporation Commission, getting the lowdown on all the news on up here in the White Mountains, and the good news for APS, getting natural gas going there, which will be a great thing for us. And and please let us know anything else that's coming up and what's going on, okay? We super appreciate you keeping an eye on us up here in the White Mountains and all of Arizona. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Okay, Nick Myers of the Corporation Commission, thank you so much. All righty, everybody, keep it right here. iTalk 106.7 FM, the voice of the mountain.